Approval of the Senate for the government's plans and programs within different sectors. All senators may contribute to the State of the Nation debate.
And that's what's on the agenda. It should be noted that elements of the day's agenda can be changed or moved. But before we go, here are a few things you should bear in mind if you plan to attend a session at Gordon House. No visitor shall create any act or disorder within the precincts of the House. No visitor shall be admitted to the House without first obtaining an admission card. Visitors who remain within the precincts of the House during a suspension of the session are asked to keep silent. No photography, videography, or sketching of the proceedings is allowed, unless so authorized by the presiding officer. And there should be no smoking inside the Parliamentary building. Here are some more interesting facts about the procedures of the Houses of Parliament.
Prorogation signals the end of a session of Parliament. The life or term of Parliament is 5 years, but it may be terminated earlier if a general election is called. Dissolution signals the end of the parliamentary term. When the Parliament is dissolved, all matters before it are terminated and all members vacate their seats. However, cabinet ministers continue to carry out their functions until a new cabinet is named. Let's talk about parliamentary protocol. Parliamentary protocol requires that members observe certain rules, among which are the following. Members shall be present in the House a few minutes before the scheduled time of commencement of a sitting. Members shall cease all conversation and rise in their places when the Marshal announces the arrival of the presiding officer. Members shall bow at the presiding officer on returning or leaving the chamber. Members shall at all times address the presiding officer or, in committee, the chairman. Members shall not sit or stand with their backs towards the presiding officer.
Now over to the proceedings.
Mr. President, it is always my honor to rise in this House to make a contribution to national development. It's not lost on me the awesome responsibility the Prime Minister has assigned to me in providing him support at the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation in relation to oversight of the water sector. This morning, I rise to update this chamber and indeed the nation on a project of national significance, being undertaken in partnership with the National Water Commission at the Mona Reservoir. The National Water Commission has a network of more than 730 facilities, which consumes over 17 gigawatt hours of electricity monthly, at an average cost of about Jamaican $650 million. Mr. President, increases in oil prices earlier this year triggered spikes in electricity bills, with monthly costs surpassing $1 billion Jamaican dollars for the first time. Mr. President, energy is one of the most important pillars of water production and distribution. Water is the basis of human life, all life. It is the basis of human dignity and human health. It is the foundation on which all economic activity is built. Within the DNA of potable water, however, Mr. President, we find energy. It is for this reason, Mr. President, that Prime Minister Holness has directed us at MEGJC and NWC to take a serious look at our energy consumption. I intend to speak to this issue holistically in my contribution to the State of the Nation debate. However, there is an element of our efforts at energy reform that I will speak to this morning. To reduce its energy cost, the NWC is installing solar power at several of its facilities, which is in keeping with Jamaica's National Energy Policy 2009 to 2030 to achieve no less than 20% of the renewable energy mix by 2030. This target in that policy, which is to be updated, does not reflect the ambition of over 50% of our energy coming from renewables, which has been articulated by the Most Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. President, the GOJ recently approved the Mona Reservoir floating solar project, which was officially launched by the PM on Wednesday, September 28, 2022. Derillion Energy Jamaica Limited, partnering with the Aten Group and REIL Energy Investments Limited will implement the project, which has a total capital expenditure or investment of over $62 million US. Mr. President, the project will involve A, the installation of a 45 megawatt peak direct current floating photovoltaic renewable energy plant with a 25 megawatt per hour DC battery storage facility at the National Water Commission's Mona Reservoir. It includes the NWC licensing approximately 100 acres of the water service at the Mona Reservoir and leasing 4 acres of land for inverters and grid tie-in equipment for an initial period of 25 years to DEJL, with a lease payment, of $25,000 per annum, US dollars. 2, a lease to NWC at a fixed monthly payment equivalent to 9.75 cents per kilowatt hour of 10 megawatts DC floating photovoltaic and 5 megawatts of battery energy storage for self-generation and wheeling of 5 megawatts AC of firm power to other NWC site locations between the hours of 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. Mr. President, for context, NWC currently pays approximately 38 US cents per kilowatt hour. Provision of 20 megawatts per hour of battery storage energy to the JPS grid between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. as a grid stabilizer facility. And 4, strategic sharing of resources to deliver grid stable power at US 9.75 cents per kilowatt hour. Mr. President, B, the granting of a 35 megawatt electricity license to DEGL by the Minister, being the Minister of Energy, in accordance with Section 91C of the Electricity Act 2015 for the floating photovoltaic renewable energy system at the NWC's Mona Reservoir. 35 megawatts DC of renewable power generation is intended to be supplied to the JPS grid with a 20 megawatts per hour grid storage system, as well as the grid stability system. Mr. President, the project is now up and running, and the initial pilot of approximately 50 kilowatts, which was installed by DEJL in May 2022, has resulted in a reduction in energy consumption at the Mona treatment plant already of 31% when compared to May's energy consumption. Mr. President, there are many benefits that will be derived by the NWC and by extension the people of Jamaica from this project. A key benefit being energy savings. The NWC will utilize 100% of its energy needs at the Mona treatment plant complex. This will result in savings at today's energy cost of approximately $35 million at that facility annually. 2, the NWC will receive payments for the leasing of 100 acres of water surface plus 4 acres of land for the installation of inverters, battery storage, and grid stability equipment of US $25,000 per annum. Projected savings due to reduced evaporation losses at the reservoir surface is estimated at 576,000 cubic meters annually, along with reduced need to treat algae buildup with a projected upside of US $368,000 annually in revenue and cost savings. Desilting capacity, Mr. President. Desilting capacity gains, which is a function of drought mitigation, given that the project entails controlled desilting of the reservoir as a part of the tethering installation process, thus allowing for an additional storage capacity of 768,000 cubic meters of water, resulting in approximately US $515,000 per year in benefits based on the bathymetry study completed. Mr. President, another major benefit, and perhaps the major benefit, is pending the finalization of the wheeling rates. The NWC should conservatively see a reduction in the agency's overall energy cost per kilowatt hour of 30% of current rate of approximately 38 cents per kilowatt hour, as at the cost at August 2022. As stated above, Mr. President, NWC will be wheeling 5 megawatts AC of firm power to the NWC qualified facilities under the wheeling regime between the hours of 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. The projected savings conservatively, Mr. President, is approximately $1 billion Jamaican dollars a year for the NWC. Mr. President, well, you know the finances of NWC better than most, so the NWC may now be able to pay its bills on time, which is a good start. Mr. President, the Mona Reservoir floating solar project is an example of the government leading the way in implementing a strategic project that will generate green energy that is both resilient and climate adaptive. This is but another tangible step in Jamaica implementing its NDCs. Colleagues should recall that Jamaica was the 11th country in the world to submit its updated nationally determined contributions to the UNFCCC. And in this commitment, Jamaica is committed to reducing its use of fossil fuels to ensure a reduction of 60% of our emissions by 2030. To this end, Mr. President, the government of Jamaica is reviewing the Electricity Act, nearing completion of both an updated climate change policy and emissions policy. And colleagues would recall that we recently tabled a new EV policy, as well as changed the tax structure regarding the same. Mr. President, I'll make two final points in the support of this important project. Not critical to the economic impact, but very important to the social impact from this project. There are many Jamaicans who enjoy the amenities of the Mona Reservoir for exercise. Mr. President, they will not be displaced. In fact, during the installation of the floating solar system, the track will be upgraded to improve the surface. The base on which the solar panels will rest, Mr. President, is plastic. This project will be producing the base for this solar system from recycled Jamaican plastic waste. So it is a circular economy project. Mr. President, this project is good for the NWC. And because it is good for the NWC, it is good for Jamaica. And to the point raised sotto voce, Mr. President, we still are at approximately 78% of our citizens having access to potable water. This fiscal space will allow us to close that gap, and we will use every dollar of it to ensure that more Jamaicans get more reliable water supply every single day. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Muda. Senator Samuda, thank you. Senator Bunting.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Minister, you've thrown a lot of information and a lot of numbers in particular in your statement. And of course, it will take some time for us to digest it. But at one point, I'm trying to reconcile. I think at one stage you said that there would be savings to NWC on its energy bill of 1 billion Jamaican dollars per annum. And then in another area, I think you said the annual electricity bill was 650 million. I'm trying to, per month. So, in a single month. So overall, this would be somewhere around 12 to 15% savings on the total. No, over the course of a year, I mean. At peak. Okay. Well, whatever it is, it will be material savings for the NWC. Clearly, on the basis of the Minister's presentation, Mr. President, this is a project that will be beneficial for the NWC. And I'm assuming, although I was chairman of NWC over 2 decades ago, I'm assuming that the reduction in energy costs will benefit the consumers to the ratepayers. It should be passed on, in my mind, although I have not heard the minister speak to that. And I'm wondering if that, if my assumption is incorrect, because my recollection is that the NWC had an energy charge component of their of their OUR tariff that should be reduced based on this. So I'm asking, I think, yeah, was it PAM? Yeah. But as I said, my experience with this is rather dated. So I would appreciate if the minister could clarify how this will affect the consumers, not just in a sort of general sense of the public, but in particular the account holders, the ratepayers, the customers of the NWC. I have myself benefited from the installation of a residential solar installation system, panels and smart inverter and batteries over the last year. And if my own experience is typical, the payback period is very short. For my system, based on the results I've been getting in the last 11 months, it's about a 4-year payback period, which is just about one of the best investments available. However, it raises a bigger policy issue, Senator Webby, and you would appreciate this. We have seen a number of the larger industrial and commercial users coming off, either partially or totally, off the JPS grid, because whether it be from a cogeneration system that gives them the heat or the refrigeration as a byproduct of generating their own electricity, it makes economic sense for them. So you have a lot of the large industrial and commercial customers putting in their own facilities, whether gas generation or solar, etc. You also have the residential customers who can afford the capital outlay, also like myself, also coming off the JPS grid. And what is going to be happening if your best residential and commercial customers and industrial are coming off the grid? The overheads of the JPS, all the an investment in that new gas generating facility, etc., all of that now will be spread over a smaller base. So the unit cost, the per kilowatt hour cost, will increase. That is going to create a squeeze from the bottom, because the poorer consumers, JPS consumers, who are now struggling to pay their bills, it will become unaffordable for them. And it may even create more incentives for, what's the euphemism that JPS uses for? Unaccounted for losses. I can't remember, there's a euphemism they use to describe the electricity that's being used but not being billed or collected for. And so what you're essentially going to have, it seems to me, over the long term, is a squeeze from top and bottom. The best commercial, industrial, residential customers, like NWC, will be reducing their consumption because they can go to alternative sources of energy, whether renewable or clean or otherwise. The best residential customers who can either afford or are worthy or are credit-worthy customers, whether they can afford it to upfront the capital themselves or be funded through a financial institution or the provider, they will be coming off. And then at the bottom, as the unit cost goes up, it will become less affordable. So customers, smaller residential customers, will be coming off. You're going to create a squeeze on the distribution company, the company doing the distribution, because they're going to have those overheads spread over a smaller and smaller base. Now, this may not be an issue today, because you better than me can probably say what is the take-up and what is the growth in the overall consumption and production of the JPS. I don't know if this trend is sufficient that it has already slowed that growth or even stopped it and threatened to reverse it. But it is, to my mind, a policy issue that we need to examine carefully, because it may result in excessively high rates for the average JPS customer, that customer in the middle, who may not be the prime commercial, industrial, or residential, or be the struggling customer at the other end. So the unit cost, the per kilowatt hour cost, when those overheads are spread over a smaller base, are going to increase. And I would really appreciate if the minister could advise what is the policy response of the government, anticipating that as a medium to long-term consequence, and how that will be mitigated. But certainly from the perspective of the NWC, I think this seems to be a good initiative. If the 62 million provides the same 25% return that, or thereabouts, 4-year payback, that means that it's split roughly evenly between the NWC and the company that's providing the service, because NWC will get about 6 million, which would be about a 10%, 6.4 million or so, the 1 billion converted to US, which would be about a 10, 11, 12% return on the 62 million invested. And I'm assuming the balance of that return will go to the company who is installing it and financing it. So it should be a good investment for both the company and for NWC. So we welcome in that sense. We welcome the positive environmental impact, and I hope that whatever the plastic recycling facility that's in place to provide the recycled plastic base for this will be something that will now be generally available to assist with recycling more broadly and use recycled plastic in a broader range of products that will be available to the Jamaican market. And of course, again, from an environmental perspective, reducing the consumption of fossil fuels and transferring a significant amount of load to renewable energies. So from that perspective, the opposition clearly welcomes it, supports it, but it raises other policy issues, not just because of this particular installation, but the broader trend that we're seeing. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bunting. Minister?
Thank you, Senator Bunting. So I'll start from the points of agreement, which is that yes, it is good for NWC. It does create opportunity to fix much of the legacy issues that have bedeviled the institution because of the financial state that we as a country allowed it to fall into. I'll start by making the point that when the electricity rates went up to over $1 billion, we didn't pass on any increases to the consumer. What it did is that
Mr. President?
Yes,
sure.
Leader.
As was indicated this morning, and apology to Senator Samuda will pick up later on, I'm going to ask that the sitting of the Senate be suspended at this time for a later time this morning.
The question is that the Senate be suspended temporarily. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The Honourable Senate is hereby suspended.
How do bills become law in Jamaica? Laws are made to create order, to ensure our safety, and to protect our rights against abuses by other citizens, organizations, and even the government itself. A bill is a proposal for either a new law or for a change to an existing law. Jamaica's Parliament is responsible for making our laws, and that responsibility is shared between two houses. There are 21 parliamentarians appointed from both political parties to the upper house, also known as the Senate. And there are 63 members of parliament that we, the people, elect to the lower house, also known as the House of Representatives. To pass a law, there is a minimum of 6 stages required in each house. The process can begin in the upper house by a senator or in the lower house by your member of parliament. And their proposals for a new bill can certainly start with you, the citizen. Now, since the process often begins in the House of Representatives, let's start there. 1. The first stage begins with the introduction by the minister responsible for the bill, followed by the first reading of the bill by the clerk to the houses. This clerk is more like the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer for the Parliament. An announcement of the bill is published in the Gazette. This is a public newsletter that the government uses to inform the citizens of what the Parliament is doing on your behalf. 2. The second reading begins with a summary of the bill by the minister. The main reasons for the bill are discussed both by the government and opposition members to determine if Jamaicans would really be better off with the new law or changes to an existing law. A vote is taken by the House to determine if the bill will move to the committee stage. Sometimes before going to that stage, the minister responsible for the bill can recommend the use of a joint select committee. It's called joint as its members are taken from both the upper and lower house. To benefit from greater consultation, the committee is empowered to invite the public to share their views of the bill in writing or in person, and does so through radio, TV, and newspaper adverts. This joint select committee submits its recommendations to the House of Representatives. The House debates this report, and a vote is taken to determine if the bill should go on to the committee stage, where it is examined by a committee of the whole House. Yes, that's the name. And that's what it is, a committee of all the members of Parliament that carefully examines each clause and makes improvements to ensure the bill will achieve its objectives. As chairman, the Speaker of the House monitors the process to make sure the rules of the House are obeyed and the process moves along smoothly. 4. The Committee of the whole House examines the bill clause by clause, then sends its recommendations for changes to the House of Representatives. This is called the report stage. 5. The bill then passes to the third reading to allow a final opportunity for MPs to make changes before it is sent to senators in the upper house. 6 to 10. In the upper house, the senators go through the same steps we just described. If any changes are made, the bill has to be returned to the House of Representatives for their discussion and approval. Now, if the bill had started in the upper house, it would also have to be returned to them for approval of any changes made by the lower house. 11. Throughout the entire process, the bill is being checked by the Legislative Council. That's the Parliament's lawyer. But before the last step, a copy is sent to the Attorney General of Jamaica for final review and certification. 12. If all is well, the bill is sent to receive the royal assent from the Governor General as the representative of the Queen, Elizabeth II. The bill is now an Act of Parliament. The Act is gazetted, and the rights of Jamaicans are further preserved and protected by a new law.
There is a fundamental and irreconcilable conflict between the interests of the tobacco industry and public policy interests. The tobacco industry, for profit, produces and promotes a product that has been scientifically proven to be highly addictive and causes millions of deaths per year. This is in conflict with the intent of public policies, particularly those related to safeguarding the health and well-being of citizens. In keeping with Jamaica's treaty obligations, the proposed Tobacco Control Act makes provision for the strict regulation of the interaction between public officials and the tobacco industry. Strong tobacco control policies, such as the provisions in the proposed act, will safeguard public health policies and give the next generation a chance to live and breathe easily.
Do you wish there were a way your community could get funding to improve a school, health center, sports program, and more? There is! It's the Constituency Development Fund. Here are a few things you probably didn't know about the CDF and how you can make it work better for you. The CDF policy promotes citizen participation in community development and protection of taxpayers' funds. It outlines that MPs are to meet with citizens at least once every 2 years to agree on the projects needed. You know, it used to be once a year? We should really go back to that. Projects developed without community consultation are not to be approved by the bipartisan CDF Parliamentary Committee. There are 26 government agencies that implement projects, usually for a small fee. Funds are provided directly from the Office of the Prime Minister to the implementing agency, not through the Member of Parliament. The CDF unit monitors project costs and implementation, so if you have questions about how the CDF are run in your community, contact them. To ensure no one project or community gets all the funds, there are 6 project categories with spending limits for each. There must be no less than 5 and no more than 20 projects each year. To learn more, visit jampja.org to view your MP's CDF info and tell them how this fund has impacted you. If you don't see your MP's CDF reports, then put them under little pressure, man. Call, tweet, email. Ask them when they'll submit it and when is the next CDF meeting. Change is possible. It's already happening. What we need is you. A message from the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, funded by the European Union and the Inter-American Development Bank in partnership with the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica.
Jamaica and its workforce are advancing quickly. Life-changing opportunities are arising. You need training and support. We are the Renewed Heart NSTA Trust, committed to providing new and emerging skills training and opportunities. Come to Heart. We'll help you claim your place in the workforce of the future.
Let us resolve our family disputes peacefully. A family is a circle of love, support, and strength. Violence has no place.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
Develop a sense of purpose that says you're not here by accident. You are here for greatness. You are here with destiny in mind. You are supposed to do something great, and you're on that pathway. There are persons who are in the departure lounge of life, at the end of their life, and they look back and they have regret because they never took time to uncover and develop a sense of purpose. Why am I here? What am I supposed to do before I leave this 7 billion people planet called Earth? What am I supposed to accomplish? Having a sense of greatness that's in you. You're talented, you have gifts and abilities. Some of you are good with numbers, some of you are good with words, some of you are good with both, some of you are artistic, creative, some of you are sports-oriented, and there are many things. And you take time to discover what are you passionate about. What can I just do naturally? I can jump out of my sleep and do it easily. Speaking out to your talents and abilities, your giftings. All of these come into your sense of purpose. the things that you are to do in life as you are to impact people, where you dream. When you close your eyes, what do you see yourself doing? And knowing that the sky is the limit. Second thing I want to say quickly is that you must learn to persevere. I heard Marquis speak about perseverance. Everybody say perseverance. Sometimes we don't achieve much because we give up too easily. You have to learn, if you want good, your nose have to. Yes, man, you have to get your feelings hurt and still go on. When I was doing my PhD, boy, a man tell me, man, people seem to like you. Wayne, why don't you just leave this program and go back to your country? You have a master's. The PhD is not for you. Why don't go and make money? And that was a racist comment because I was black. I was the only black person in the program. And he was saying things that hurt me, and I didn't want him to see me offended. I left his presence, went into my room, and I cried. But I decided to continue in my effort for excellence. Are you hearing me? And so perseverance means to continue a course of action in spite of difficulty, in spite of opposition. When they fight you down, when bad mind reach you, and they're fighting you down, and they say you're not the right gender, young ladies, and they say you don't deserve to be here, don't pay no attention, press on nonetheless. And it means you also have to have the right people around you. Be careful of the company you keep. As you go through life, you're going to make mistakes. As you go through life, you may fail at something. You want people around you who can encourage you to get up again.
Jamaicans, look on the murder rate. You think that normal? We need to get every illegal gun and save our country.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
Mommy?
Yes, Zoe?
Can we read this book? It will only take 10 minutes.
Sure, sit down. Every spring, Madame Angel Wing arranges.
Do you have 10 minutes? Read with your child today. Reading with your children for just 10 minutes each day helps develop their language and listening skills, stimulates their imagination, and expands their understanding of the world. So, start reading with your child today.
Crime and violence is infecting our youth. We must work together to rescue them from the gangs, engage them in productive activities, and safeguard Jamaica's future.
The proceeding was brought to you by the Office of the Prime Minister.
People always say government must be held accountable. But it's whose job to keep government accountable? And what that really mean? Well, you see, when ministers and public officials have to provide answers for decisions made and can face consequences for those actions and decisions, that means they're being held accountable. Keeping government accountable is a key responsibility of our elected representatives, and the Parliament provides special tools or mechanisms just for this. As citizens, we need to understand how they work so we can play our part to ensure that the members of Parliament we elect are using the tools and doing their job well. Here are 4 of the primary tools you should understand and talk to your MP about. Tool number 1, Minister Statements. To effectively monitor the government, MPs need to stay informed. Every Tuesday when Parliament sits, different cabinet ministers are scheduled to give an update on decisions they're making on our behalf. These updates are called Statements by Ministers. They cover a wide range of national issues that other MPs, media, and citizens may have questions about and wish to examine further. That brings us to tool number 2. What you do when you want information? You ask questions, and that's why we have Question Time. Both opposition and government MPs can submit questions to the Prime Minister or Cabinet Ministers for details on, for example, how a contract was awarded or expenditure to purchase tablets for schools. So if you ever have a question for a government minister, try asking through your MP. After all, that's why they're your political representatives. They should represent your questions and concerns to the government. Tool number 3, Parliamentary Debates. When cabinet ministers present the government's proposals for new policies, laws, and programs, parliamentary debates allow both opposition and government MPs to air concerns, make suggestions, and endorse proposals. If you ever watch those debates, you know they can get a little fiery. But the debate is important, as it informs decisions and continues until a vote is taken on the way forward. Then we have tool number 4, Parliamentary Committees. The general sittings of Parliament are not always sufficient for detailed examination of government work, so oversight committees are formed using government and opposition members to do just that. Some committees like the PAC and the PAAC are in place for an entire parliamentary term. Their job is to monitor the use of public funds to find ways to increase value and efficiency while reducing waste and corruption. Cabinet and state ministers are not appointed to oversight committees since they are a part of the government. Some committees are formed when a need arises. For example, joint select committees are formed to review draft policies or legislation or to probe other matters of serious national importance. Members of these committees are both opposition and government MPs and senators, and these committees will usually invite citizens to share their opinions, concerns, and recommendations. So there you have it, 4 accountability tools of Parliament that are used to make sure government run right. Visit jampja.org to find contact information for your MP. Invite them to meet with the community so they can better represent your issues and concerns in Parliament and keep government accountable. Get involved and let's make Jamaica land we love, Jamaica land we own, and Jamaica land we run well. A message from the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, funded by the European Union and the Inter-American Development Bank in partnership with the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica.
Here is a special parenting message brought to you by the National Family Planning Board, 5 Sylvan Avenue, Kingston 5. There's no job more important than parenting. That was a special parenting message brought to you by the National Family Planning Board, 5 Sylvan Avenue, Kingston 5.
Hey you! Yes you! Let's go on a public sector journey together. Check your rear view and lift the gas. We all rely on public sector workers, from hospitals and care workers to schools, where our children get the education in emergency situations when we're most in need. In turn, public sector workers are paid by us. The current compensation structure in the public sector is complex, inconsistent, and inequitable. That's about to change. Welcome to the new compensation system. The new system is simple and easily understood. It's consistent, enabling equitable application and transparency across the public sector. It will reward high performance and it's sustainable. The government of Jamaica is committed to investing in its people and building a better public sector for.
Here's how we find the alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Now I know my ABCs. Next time, won't you sign with me?
Money, 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 money! Money! So what you say? Talk to me, right?
It takes so long, man. People have places to go, you know. Get them on urban table number.
Happy and nice. You know how much people me have to deal with before me reach here, sir? You're lucky.
Put 3 bills for number 5.
Wait. We can place the bets with you? Yeah, man. You see, when you win with we, you get a little extra. So what you say?
Police, nobody move. Illegal gambling is a criminal offense. If convicted, you could face a fine of up to $1 million or up to 18 months in prison. When gambling, choose licensed and registered gaming establishments. Stop illegal gambling now. Call Crime Stop at 311 to report illegal gambling. You don't have to give your name. A message from the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Commission.
If you are experiencing symptoms of the monkeypox virus, including fever, intense headache, swelling of the lymph nodes, back pain, muscle ache, lack of energy, and/or a rash on the skin, you must self-isolate immediately and call ahead to your health center or doctor before visiting. The virus may enter the body through broken skin, even if not visible, the respiratory tract, or mucous membranes, eyes, nose, or mouth, and has an incubation period of between 5 and 21 days. The spread of monkeypox may occur when a person comes into close contact with an infected animal, direct contact with monkeypox skin lesions or scabs of an infected person, contact with clothing or linen such as bedding or towels used by an infected person, and the coughing or sneezing of an individual with a monkeypox rash. Wear a mask, frequently wash hands, and practice physical distancing as part of the infection prevention and control efforts. For additional information on monkeypox, visit the Ministry of Health and Wellness website at moh.gov.jm or contact the local public health department. Whenever you hear the following tone, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, ODPEM, will be giving information on an emergency situation affecting the island. Please be on the alert and listen to your radio and television for further information. This was a test of the Emergency Alert System, brought to you by ODPEM.
Remember that big project the government announced them was going to from when? You ever catch yourself a wonder what happened to it? Stop wonder like an outsider and start move like the country belong to you. You have a right to publicly owned information, and the Access to Information Act gives you that power. I know you have enough questions about how government are run or not run, so let me show you how it works. Say mosquito spraying going on in your community, your children asthmatic and you want to know what chemicals are in it. Or what about that Auditor General report on a public official getting twice his salary with no proper approval? Is your taxes and you want to know if they paid it back? First, do some basic searching to see what is already on government websites. If you don't see what you're looking for, make a formal ATI request by completing the application form on the ATI site or sending a letter or email. And remember, you don't have to say why you need it. It is your right to know. Make sure you send your request to the right agency, and once they confirm receipt, they get 30 calendar days to provide the information. A maximum of 60 if extra time is needed. Yes, I know you want access to everything, but sensitive documents are protected from the public for up to 20 years. For example, documents that would expose a citizen's personal privacy, or those dealing with cabinet discussions, the Governor General's office, or information on the investigative activities of the security forces. Any public officer who tries to destroy or hide any official document can be sanctioned. And if you're having difficulties, the ATI unit will help. So, what if the chemicals in the mosquito spray are toxic? What if the agency did not even try to get back the money they paid out? Call or email your MP. Share the concern, because as your elected representative, they can represent your questions to the government ministers in the House. Remember, it is the job of parliamentarians to monitor and hold the government to account on your behalf. Is not every country give citizens this kind of power, you know? And at 20 years we have this law, and we barely use it. So access information and mind your business, Jamaica. Visit jampja.org today to see what information we access to make it easier for you to hold the government to account. Let's do our job to make Jamaica land we love, Jamaica land we own, and Jamaica land we run well. A message from the Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, funded by the European Union in partnership with the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica.
Crime is Jamaica's #1 threat. As we stay apart while working together to fight COVID-19, we must all live good and unite against crime and violence in Jamaica. Live good means talk it out, don't fight it out.
Prince has Zoom engagement, so they're going to be with us for a short time. Can be seated, please.
President, I had been on my feet when we had suspended. If I could be allowed to complete.
Absolutely.
Thank you, President. I was responding to points raised by colleague Senator Bunting. We had started at the point of agreement, which is that, yes, this is good for NWC, and the truth is anything that is good for a public body or any of the country's MDAs is good for the country. NWC's financial challenges have been well known for decades. It's been deemed in several documents analyzing our economy as one of our fiscal risks across several IMF reviews, several World Bank assessments of our economy. This, in many ways, starts a process of correcting many of the legacy issues. Though energy is not a legacy issue per se, it has become a more prominent issue. I was making the point that when the energy bills spiked in the early part of the year, the increases in costs were not passed on to consumers. What took the hit was projects that were projected to be done this year, which we're only now able to put to procurement as the prices have generally stabilized a little more in recent months.
Sorry, Senator Samuda, just to welcome members of Prince Ames's delegation and, of course, our own Speaker. Welcome, Madam Speaker.
Thank you again, Mr. President, and I extend my own welcome to the delegation. So with that said, there is an eventual benefit to come in terms of the price that persons will pay for water. But the decision we have to make as the leaders, and that comes from your budget debate, it comes from the varying debates that we have regardless of which side we sit on at the times of those debates, is whether or not the money should be invested into connecting the other 22% of citizens who do not have connection to the grid, whether it should be spent to reduce debts and legacy issues that have bedeviled the institution, or whether or not it should be a simple pass-through. My view is that it should be spent to connect citizens and to upgrade the infrastructure, which is not fit for purpose in 2022. So you do have persons who are paying bills who may have water for 4 to 8 hours a day. That is not a suitable situation, and I think when we look at the cost of infrastructure, this gives us the opportunity to put in place that infrastructure. From a policy standpoint, this would not reflect in short-term reductions in bills. What it does give you the basis for is there is no need for us to go to the OUR despite other costs of imported substances, chlorine, etc., to go to the OUR for increases in costs. There's no need for increases. We've weathered the energy storm in the earlier part of the year without taking those increases. This gives us the opportunity to put in place the systems that it is unlikely, and we pray and knock on wood, we shouldn't have to have increases anytime soon while continuing our infrastructure investment. The point of the broader policy issue is not one that I'm going to address in detail, Mr. Bunton. I'll save that for the Minister of Energy. But just to say, this is an issue we have discussed and we have identified. The reality is there has to be an orderly transition to renewable energy. It has to be strategically done. It has to be done in a systematic manner that calculates potential increases in the distribution cost of energy. And you have to almost out-invest and out-deploy renewables that give you cheaper energy faster than the increases in the distribution space to ensure that there's a net decrease in costs while ensuring that we're honoring our environmental and climate obligations globally and ensuring that Jamaica is gradually becoming, with each percentage point of the national grid being from renewables, becoming a little more energy independent and a little less at risk every time there's global instability. So there are a number of reasons for this. There's the climatic responsibility, the climate responsibilities that we have. There is the environmental responsibilities. But even long-term economic stability, it is absolutely important that we stabilize the price of energy and that there is some amount of predictability for citizens, for businesses, and for all stakeholders nationally. There is, Senator Hill, I believe, still some marginal growth with JPS, even with the larger customers coming off. Where will be interesting to see over time is as we start the process of transitioning the national fleet, certainly the nationally owned fleet, and private citizens start the process of transitioning to EVs, as it has become more competitive to look at that now, what that impact will be in terms of the growth and offtake from JPS. I think that's where there's some opportunity for stability as we transition in that space, or greater opportunity for transition. But to the larger point Senator Bunting, though we are sure that we will have total savings above $1 billion, the $35 million was related to the Mona facility, and the mention of the $625 million is the average over the last 3 years in terms of energy costs. The $1 billion per month was a spike, so we certainly couldn't stomach that in a state of permanence. But I think generally when the rates are approved for the wheeling, we'd be happy to come back to this chamber and give the final numbers. But we are sure that this project will benefit the NWC with over $1 billion in energy savings, as well as in the areas that we would have mentioned by way of reduced evaporation and increased capacity. And that those have practical mitigation and adaptation benefits for us, but also financial benefits. So the truth is, with increased storage, drought will take a little longer to impact water supply when you're actually full. So I thank you, Mr. President. I don't know if there are additional questions from members. Sure.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Fraser-Binns.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Minister, I too believe that this project is in fact a very positive one and has significant contribution to be made in terms of us and the green economy. I am particularly pleased with the announcement that the base of which will be built by plastic produced here in Jamaica, because we all know the challenge that we have with plastics in the country. I, however, have some questions, and I want to start with the issue of solar. And I am quite aware that this speaks specific to the Mona Reservoir, but you will appreciate that we can't discuss the issue of solar without talking about the small man on the street. And I wondered, Minister, whether there is in fact any plan to assist every Jamaican to solarize their homes. And I say that against the background that on average, it takes anywhere between 2 million and perhaps 5, depending on the size of the home, to solarize your home. Just 2 months ago, I sought to get a quotation to solarize my home, and I was quite surprised at the cost to solarize my home. And I believe, Minister, that it is a public good for, no, not pleasantly surprised. Not pleasantly surprised. I was shocked. I couldn't do it. I couldn't afford it. And I believe, Minister, that it is a public good for more Jamaicans to be able to solarize their homes, however big or however small it is, Senator Braham. So within that context, I want to know what, or if there are any plans by the government to assist more Jamaicans to solarize. And I say that because I am aware that assistance can be sought for commercial entities to solarize their homes, but I'm not aware of their businesses, but there isn't, I'm not aware of any for private residents. So that's my first question. The second one has to do with the National Housing Trust, and I know that you may not be able to speak to the NHT because it is not within your portfolio. But what I do know is that the NHT also offers loans, Senator Hill, for persons to, not just the water heater, but to solarize their homes. But the catch with it is that you have had to have an existing loan for a minimum of 15 years, which makes no sense. Makes absolutely no sense. So I am recommending to the government to quickly, with all the other recommendations that I have been making over the last week, to quickly amend the policies of the NHT to incorporate lending to individuals to solarize their homes, notwithstanding the duration of their loan. In fact, I want to say that as part of our commitment to climate change and the green economy, and I've been using that term a lot today, Minister Samuda, I know you like it, but on a serious note, the origin, exactly. But as our commitment to that we should make it almost a additive that once you're getting a mortgage, that you have this facility available for solarizing your home. So that is something that I am recommending. Minister, the issue, as we talk about, alternate forms of energy, we have the successful example under Philip Powell of the Winton Wind Farm. And I would like to know whether there are any plans by the government to expand our wind energy. And finally, I'm not sure if you can speak to this, but perhaps you can pass it to your minister, Senator Samuda. There are funds available. I know that recently the IMF spoke about its Resilience and Sustainable Trust Fund, and there's another fund available through the World Bank. And I am curious to find out whether or not the government of Jamaica has any plans to tap into this trust fund. As I understand, the IMF trust fund is that you are allowed, you can get, I think, up to 20 years to repay, 10 of which you have nothing to pay. So you really start paying in the 10th year or the 11th year. So, without knowing all the details of the loan and how it operates, I believe that it is something worth pursuing. And I would, A, want to find out if the government has commenced looking into this loan, or B, I want to recommend that is something we look into to see whether or not the terms are conducive to our economic projection, our projection in terms of solarizing homes, and if it's something that we can tap into. The final question, some are comments, some are questions, but this is a question. On page 4, you mentioned the finalization of the wheeling rates, and we see the benefits to be derived from the wheeling and the solarization of $1 billion in terms of savings, which we, Senator Bunting, we can't wait to see that, because Lord knows that the NWC and the country could benefit from that saving. The challenge we have is the pace at which we either implement regulations, policies, amend our legislation. And I want to know whether or not there is a specific timeline that the government is looking at wherein the wheeling rates can be finalized. Needless to say that the sooner we can do this, the more good it will have for the country. But certainly it would be good if a timeline could be stated, if you already have one, to share it with the country, and we can look towards that. I'm sure Senator Allen will speak in a bit about the Electricity Act. But those are my comments, Minister, through you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. The funny thing about renewable energy is that it cuts across several portfolios, from housing, infrastructure, energy, indeed environment, climate change, and in this case, water. So there are some areas where the announcements are not mine to make, and I shan't veer into those, just to say that it is in many ways, Senator Hill, good politics to call for something that will happen soon. But I make a lot of what you asked, but I won't go into the specifics, because they're the announcements of other ministers. Certainly on the broader update of the energy policy, that would be for MSET to bring to the House and to go into. Matters related to housing would be the Prime Minister to make those announcements. But just to say in broad terms, Jamaica needs energy independence if it is to bring about the long-term prosperity, the inclusive prosperity and progress that we seek. Jamaica has all the solar we need. We have quite a bit of the wind we need, and we have a fair bit of hydro that we need. And the question really is what mix and how you implement over time that gives you that independence, that security, that resilience. The Minister of Finance, so we went into another area. The Minister of Finance is currently at meetings in Washington with the World Bank and IMF, etc. The ultimate decisions in terms of what we contemplate as debt and how we fund our development is one that we've dealt with in this chamber. We've looked at very seriously, I'd say, over the last 10 years. The specific IMF fund that you mentioned may not be the most competitive that I've seen, both from private and public sources and from multilaterals. Jamaica is obviously open to grants to finance some of its development, but debt has to be carefully considered and allow the Ministry of Finance to look at that. But in the stage of development that we are, Senator Hill, I'd say that the GCF, the IDB, and indeed even USAID, even through their facilities that are part grant, part loan, I've found to be a little bit more competitive for what you, in the context that you mentioned, which is how do you pass it through on lend to homeowners. So obviously we leave that to the Minister of Finance, but just to say that there are a whole range and raft of financing options. The other thing the country will have to look at, as it is doing with the Electricity Act, is the participation of private sector as we seek this cheaper energy rate. Invariably, there is not a day, I'm sure, that any minister or member of the government side, I'm sure even opposition, that someone doesn't come to you and say, I have an energy project, I have an energy project. I think the country just needs to finally set itself on a clear path that explains how persons can invest in their own energy production and savings. We are nearing that point. The question of renewables is being dealt with under the Electricity Act, which is being looked at now, I believe, in Joint Select. And as an energy policy, I know the minister will bring the updated energy policy as he brought the EV policy very soon. And beyond that, I think there are hints within the emissions and the climate change policy, which are in final round of consultation now to be tabled before the end of the year, that speak to our amended targets, that speak to how we intend to mobilize these funds and how we will get to 50% by 2030.
President.
Senator Brown.
Good. Mr. Samuda, I note from your statement, as well as looking at matters from Cabinet, that there's a solar photovoltaic facility being established at CMU. Is there an overall Cabinet policy in respect to solar of government, making use of solar energy and other renewables in government agencies? And that's one. And I'll raise the other question now that I thought about raising given the presence of our overseas delegation, but I nevertheless feel important, especially in current situation, about ownership of lands, whether or not on page 2 in your statement, where the 25-year lease of 108 acres of water surface and 4 acres of lands, whether or not that agreement includes an option to purchase, because certainly I don't want my generation to come 25 years after to go demolishing because there was no option to purchase. And so I don't want my grandchildren to be called demolition man. So the question is there an option to purchase in these agreements? Because we haven't seen them. May it please you, Mr. President.
The policy direction as it relates to solar energy, both for public sector, private sector assets, is contained in your energy policy, which is being updated now. There's also the green economy policy, which I would have been completed a couple of years ago, I think, under funding from the World Bank, that speaks to how we will mobilize solar. So in context, there isn't a cabinet document specific to solaring government buildings. There is a program, I believe, that was started in early 2016 that was around energy savings in public buildings. And that program is underway and has yielded significant savings. There is no option to purchase the land, and in the same way we're not in the business of demolition, we're also not in the business of facilitation, criminal capture of land. So we've gone through all of the process, we've gone through all of the processes necessary, all of the consultation. We have the non-objections from the Ministry of Finance, AG's Chambers, Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, and all of the relevant bodies to ensure that this process followed the rules and the laws of the land. But there is no option to purchase at the end.
I take it through you, Mr. President, that these contracts went through the normal procurement arrangement. And I'm very happy that you are not into the demolition only of poor people's houses, I would say.
No issues. The processes as established under Jamaican law were all followed. The process was perhaps even a little slower than we would have liked, as all of the relevant entities under the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, the Attorney General's Chambers and the Ministry of Finance were engaged at every step of the way.
Yeah, Mr. President, with respect to the Minister, I don't think it's sufficient to say that Jamaican law was followed. We're talking about procurement. The member wants to know which procurement methodology outlined in the policy paper was used in this. Was it the Swiss challenge method, for example? That's what he's asking.
The Jamaican government received an unsolicited proposal in 2017 for the lease of the surface of the dam to facilitate the energy production. That would have gone to Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology. After several rounds of review, it was determined that it was because of the asset being NWC's, that it was to be sent to NWC. Enterprise team was set up, I believe, chaired by DBJ, if I'm not mistaken, but definitely DBJ would have been on the enterprise team. NWC, they were the secretariat rather. And the process went through, I think, 3.5 years of negotiation after being sent over.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick question. The fact that I am a member of the Joint Select Committee with the review of the Electricity Act, and much of what was presented this morning, Minister, is predicated on the review of the Electricity Act. And I know you're not the minister with that responsibility, but it would be good if we could get some indication based on the urgency of the situation, the status of that, because it's a much delayed, very much delayed process, which we were promised by the minister would have restarted in September, and we're now heading towards the end of October. And as we all can accept, it's pretty critical to this and other, much of the work that you're undertaking.
So to be clear, the ability for NWC to wheel is already in Jamaican law. The ability to have a license applied for and granted in this manner exists in the current legislation. So those amendments, or rather what you're considering in the Joint Select Committee, really look at how we move much further faster and how we include more participants, certainly in the generation space for energy. As it relates to the Joint Select Committee, I'm not on that Joint Select Committee, so I don't have any visibility on why there are delays. But I do know that we're all very clear on the limitations of the Parliament and indeed the parliamentary process, because invariably it's the same staff doing all of the Joint Select Committees. I know the cyber crimes Joint Select Committee is still grinding through, and when you look at the schedule, I haven't seen much free time in the schedule recently, but I don't know the specific reason related to that, as I'm not on that committee.
Thank you, Senator Allen. Senator...
Are you aware that there are...
Senator Morris?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. President. Sorry about that. Are you aware, Minister, that the former PCJ Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica had similar ideas / proposals relating to the use of the Mona Dam for a solar system similar to what is established, since you mentioned the 2017 unsolicited proposal.
I've heard in passing and in open discussions the concept of using the reservoir from over the past 20 years in varying fora. I'm not aware of the PCJ having that program, as I've never had oversight of the Ministerial Energy.
Thank you very much. Thank you, members. I just want to explain to the delegation that they are not usually so well behaved, you know. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following: the Auditor General's Department review of the fiscal policy paper for the year 2022-2023, interim report, which was laid on the table.
Members, I'm going to ask you to welcome His Imperial Majesty into the Senate. Thank you very much. And welcome, Minister Grange. You can continue, Madam Clerk, please.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following: the Auditor General's Department review of the fiscal policy paper for the year 2022-2023, interim report, which was laid in the House of Representatives on September 17, 2022. The Auditor General's Department certification of public bodies as not being part of the specified public service, Jamaica Mortgage Bank and the Bank of Jamaica. Annual report on audited financial statements of the Culture, Health, Arts, Sports and Education Fund for the year 2021-2022. Jamaica Hansard Parliamentary proceedings of the Honourable Senate for session 2016 to 2017, volume 42, Jamaica, dated January 8, 2016 to July 22, 2016, part 1 of 2, and for September 23, 2016 to December 16, 2016, part 2 of part 2.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to the sitting of the Senate, motions for leave to introduce bills, the presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business. Minister, I recognize you from a seat other than your own.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, today it is our intention to continue the State of the Nation debate. Senator Dr. Saphire Longmore will be our only speaker for today.
One minute, Senator Longmore. I'm just taking some instructions. Madam Clerk. Longmore, 1 minute, please. You know that we have there are sometimes requests are made which are special and which we have really accept with great joy. His Imperial Majesty, as I am informed, he is correctly addressed as, recognized that his grandfather, in visiting Jamaica in 1965, had addressed the House, and he has made a request to briefly address the Senate. So I'm going to ask that the Senate be suspended to allow Prince to address us. Those in favor? Aye. Against?
Good morning, honourable members of Parliament. For me, it's a special privilege to be in this room with you today. It's a room I've witnessed on video only during my grandfather's address to the nation. So I feel also part of that history. And I'm especially delighted that I've been invited to Jamaica by the government. I want to thank Minister Grange and all those who worked hard to make my visit possible. My wife, Princess Saba, who's not present with me, and my whole entire delegation wants to thank you all. And Jamaica is a vibrant democracy. Democracies evolve, and the Jamaican experiment of different people, one nation, is something that will resonate in any nation. And this is the challenge we hope that Africa can learn from. So I look forward to further exchanges, and I want to thank the people of Jamaica for having given me this opportunity. And of course, thank you, sir, Senator, for giving me this chance to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You want to say something? Senator Hill, I'm going to invite you just to say a brief word, but not before the Senate resumes its sitting. The Honourable Senate now resumes its sitting. Senator Hill and Senator Bond.
Mr. President, I am very pleased to be here today to see our visiting guest, the Prince, addressing us in Parliament, as his grandfather did so amazingly, historically well in 1966. I was very pleased that Minister Grange was able to find in the archives where His Majesty Haile Selassie did sign the register, and then his grandson today put his signature, not on the same page, and I fully understand, having lived in the Middle East for so long, that it would be appropriate for him to sign on a different page, and that he did. We welcome you and your delegation. We're very pleased to have you in Jamaica. We have a very long and strong tie with Ethiopia, and we wish your country well as you wish ours well. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. President. The opposition would also like to associate ourselves with those remarks of welcome for the Prince and his delegation. And I particularly have to say that my deputy leader is a big fan of the Prince. And I think she had some conflicting appointments this morning, but she insisted that she had to be here to greet you. And so on her behalf especially, and also on behalf of all the opposition senators, we greet you. We recognize the powerful historical and cultural ties that we have with your country, and indeed, of course, more broadly, with the continent of Africa. And we hope that you will enjoy your visit and that you will continue to have good relations with the government and people of Jamaica. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Bunting. And, sir, I must say that Senator Lambert Brown, who is sitting at the end there, were both students at Jamaica College when your grandfather visited our school. So it holds a special importance for us that you are here today. And of course, members, I ask you to appreciate Minister Grange, who has made the arrangements for our visit today, and of course, the Speaker who has joined us. I know exactly where I'm going. I welcome, of course, the delegation, which we have done before. But then there is former Senator. Would you stand, please? Barbara Hannah Blake. She was appointed to the Senate in 1983. 84. Well, if it were me, I would have put you there from 83. But welcome. Thank you for joining us, and I know this is an emotional time for you as well. Thank you very much. Senator Longmore.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is said, good things come to those who wait. And I much appreciate being here this morning. Mr. President, I rise to make this contribution to the state of the nation.
Senator Longmore, I'm not going to stop you again, but stop. Thank you very much. Minister Grange, I think you're leaving us now. Okay, well, the Speaker can go. I'll come around. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Senator. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Longmore.
Not a problem. Thank you. Again, those who wait. Thank you again, Mr. President. And I would have greeted the Ethiopian prince and his wife and delegation, Ministers Grange and Speaker Marissa Dalrymple, on being with us this morning. And I do wish them a prosperous and happy trip. Mr. President, I rise to make my contribution to the State of the Nation debate here in the Senate, in the upper house of Parliament. For our nation, Jamaica, the land we pledge our love and loyalty, so that this land, Jamaica, may under God increase in beauty, fellowship and prosperity, and play her part in advancing the welfare of the whole human race. Mr. President, undoubtedly there is something about this piece of rock that is Jamaica and the impact that it's had on the world that is way beyond its weight. I must say thank you to the universe and the Almighty Creator for having me here today. I have to say thank you to my father, who is exemplary in his fatherhood and his care for me and my siblings. If the world had more fathers like him, we would have no problems. My mom, who is departed, but with me always, my brother, Chapman, my sister Genevieve, and my younger brother, Chase. My dear friends who are here with me to give me support. Judge Sahai Maxwell, Miss Christine King Hadid, Mrs. Christine King, Mrs. Christine Straw Hadid. I'm mixing her up with another friend of mine, but the same name. Yakelet Kruger, Matthew Stepanov, and Pavel Golub. Mr. President, I bring attention to the strength that Jamaica has in terms of unifying people. The war in Ukraine is happening with Russia. And right there, sitting in the gallery, you have a Russian and a Ukraine who are here and have found themselves in Jamaica, just pulled, and are two of the best friends that I know personally at this time. And I send with them positive regard for a resolution of peace. Mr. President, we are here in 2022 under the 6th year of continuous administration by our Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Andrew Michael Holness, whom I thank for my reappointment to these chambers. Mr. President, I also must thank the staff. I forgot to thank the staff here in the chambers. Thank you. Led by Mrs. Valerie Curtis, who is newly appointed as our clerk officially. Mr. President, the Prime Minister and his team, at his right hand, Dr. Nigel Clark, has steered this country through very troubling times with this past COVID crisis and the financial crisis that was associated with it. Like other societies, COVID has unearthed issues that were simmering beneath the surface. It has acted to worsen what negatively pre-existed and has challenged our systems to cope and carry on. If nothing else, Mr. President, the COVID crisis has taught us the importance of healthcare in governance. And at the end of the day, good governance strives to provide good health for its people. That's the essence of it. And Mr. President, as a spokesperson for health in this upper house of Jamaica's Parliament, I'm going to take this opportunity to as best reflect on the improvement and the status of health of our people as is governed by this administration. What is specifically affecting the good governance of this country, Mr. President? Of our people? We know we have a function in government that we are to care, to navigate our country through difficult times. Our country is seeing unemployment rates at the lowest it has ever been in decades. We're seeing growth in our economy when others are shrinking or have shrunk. New and emerging growth in agriculture. Tourism that is setting global standards and the pace for others to try and follow. Our people are individually striving and succeeding. Still, we have a scourge that cuts us at our knees as we aim for the destiny that is our prosperity. There's a disconnect, there seems to be, Mr. President, between the land that tourists enjoy and the land that our citizens traverse. That disconnect, Mr. President, that scourge is crime and violence. Now, can we agree that violence is unhealthy? Can we also then agree that a violent society is one that reflects ill health? Might we further assume that a healthy society would be minimally violent? As I reflect on the state of healthcare of our nation, time has come for me in my many capacities. Time has come for me in my many capacities that I hold to truly reflect on the context of health and the sickness amongst us. What are its causes? What are its manifestations? But most importantly, what are its solutions? Time comes, Mr. President, that we seek to solve this sickness of violence that we see that is such a malady that needs remedying. Let us step away from the projections of doom and gloom in our country. If we have a problem that we think is unsurmountable, if we think of it practically in a positive way, we can overcome. Trust me, I can vouch for this. A positive outlook is foremost in overcoming any problem in life. And so, Mr. President, my prescription includes positive projection and how we look at solving this problem. So as any doctor, I reflect on it in terms of its constituents. Health. If violence is unhealthy, then let us break it down. When I was at medical school, I was taught there are 4 dimensions to health: our physical health, our mental health, our social health, and our spiritual health. Now, let us further expand that and appreciate that illness can be physically, mentally, socially, and spiritually. And violence is indeed manifestations of such illness. We recognize that it is physically unhealthy in the costs associated with the management of the physical effects of violence. The hospital bills will tell you that. We also know the mental costs of violence and clearly the social costs. So our solutions must be stemmed around this. But Mr. President, what of the spiritual costs? Dare I say that is most damaging, because it is what causes us to feel disheartened and despondent, to make us no longer want to watch the news. It undoubtedly contributes to our young, bright minds that feel that they no longer have the will to stick with it in Jamaica. And when I go and reflect and zone in on our spiritual health, if you reflect on it, physical, mental, social, and spiritual, of all 4, most paramount to the human success is their spiritual health. Why? Because it is what determines what you want to be physically. It is what determines your mental well-being. It is what determines your social interactions. If you don't have that, all else is broken. Mr. President, the 4th aspect that I mentioned, and let me realistically recognize that unfortunately in Jamaica there is a taboo around our spirituality. But yet with this taboo, you have the Jamaican sentiment of, you know, my spirit take that person there, or my spirit tell me say, or you know what, boy, I feel like my spirit broke. We need to shed light on what this is. And in my mind, our spiritual health is our sense of self, our sense of value, our sense of who we are. And in gaining this sense of self and value, you gain a sense and value for the other individual. You recognize you have a unique role to play. And in so doing, you recognize the role that the other individual plays. And Mr. President, I know people say, so what's up? What is the difference between that and mental health? Our mental health deals with our emotions, happy and sad. Our behavior, aggressive, calm. Our thinking, our cognition, our executive functions. Our spiritual health is our sense of well-being, our sense of value for your unique purpose. And so, Mr. President, for me, it is the most important aspect of our health. And why am I speaking on this? The scourge, Mr. President, crime and violence that is affecting us. We are all exploring and trying to figure out what are the solutions to crime and violence. The fact is that we have a generational predisposition to crime and violence. When we reflect, and it is so ironic that the Ethiopian prince was in these chambers this morning, I honestly wish he had stayed to hear a little bit of what I have to say. Because when we explore a child who is abused and their spirit gets broken, that inner light in them that gets extinguished, and they then develop a sense of revenge and hate. It reminds me of when our forefathers were plucked from our beginnings, when our forefathers were taken from their homes and brought forcibly across to a foreign land and forced in heinous ways to act and to exist, and then unleashed into a new world. Mr. President, these generational lack of connections with our families, with our own inherent places of origin, it filters down in the society. There is a continuity of the broken spirit that passes on from that generation to the next, to present day. And there's no question that that is manifesting in our society now. Senator Webby, when you read and you see the headline that says savagery, a 9-year-old and a 15-year-old raped, stabbed, and murdered. A family member can kill 4 members of his family. 5, the mother and 4 children. When you see a child is afraid to go home, that is because their spirit is broken, Mr. President. And this generationality of violence stems, in my mind, from what happened to our forefathers. When we think of emotions, when we think of, we're people of behavior. You act, your behavior is determined by your emotions. In reality, there are only 2 real emotions: love and hate. Every emotion is a variation between love and hate. And in those days of colonization, we were taught to hate. We were taught the punitive approach as the way to interact with each other. We were steered away from caring and love, and that passed on. Yes, one great solution is education, because with education, you learn that there is better for you out there. And that is why education is so critical for us. And so, Mr. President, I cannot, in my capacity and my professional training, recognize this significant ill health amongst our people and not suggest solutions. And these solutions are not easy. There is absolutely no question that our Prime Minister cares about Jamaica. Absolutely none whatsoever. Not a single one of us in this chamber is motivated against the development of Jamaica. Not a single one of us. The Prime Minister has had to, and we in here has had to impose states of emergencies because they were necessary. In my mind, they were necessary. There was no question. You had people dying. The communities that these emergencies, these states of emergencies were implemented in, they were relieved. But I am also the first first to admit that this is not, and it is not, the primary solution or the only solution. As any clinician, when you see a problem, you have to think of all aspects of treating that person. I'm a holistic practitioner. And so we have to look at it holistically. And you have to recognize the social interventions that are being put in place. But Mr. President, I go back to the manifestations of hate. And Mr. President, I might sound really kumbaya when I say this, but what is the opposite of hate? Love. Love. Love is the answer. Love is the answer. And it might sound really very utopian, but it is not. There's a reason Bob Marley. Can you imagine that at the turn of the millennium, they sent a capsule out in space, launched it out there. And you know the song that was there? One Love. That means that any other species in the universe interacts with Earth. This little Jamaica is what is going to make that connection. One love. Time come for us to reflect one love. Time come for us to reflect one love in our solutions, Mr. President.
That's a better time come.
Well, as always, we improve on things. Mr. President, let us start where the most obvious solution, where it is most obvious that solutions are needed. Right now, in our face, in our schools. There is no question that this is in the forefront of every citizen's mind in this country. When we consider the state of our nation, we are seeing acts of violence that are unimaginable that COVID-19 has served to amplify. The adverse childhood experiences, Mr. President, the ACEs, these are the realities of some of our children. And they have to go to school with it. When you had the COVID lockdowns, these ACEs amplified. You had increased incidences of domestic violence, child abuse in all its forms. Sexual, verbal, physical, emotional, and the most common form of abuse is neglect. And it's most damaging, actually. Substance use increase, and we're seeing these manifestations in our schools. Mr. President, our children were particularly predisposed to the lockdowns that came with COVID because, especially our teenagers, they're at that natural developmental stage of what we call identity versus confusion. They are naturally seeking to socialize, and then came the lockdowns. The other factor that impacts on this is the fact that you have teenagers who are territorial. It's a natural human, when a group forms, they go into a space, they have to find their own operations, their own niche, and you will have conflict. So, Mr. President, solutions need to start in our schools because it is that urgent. I, Mr. President, have been given a role to play in this. And I am helping to chart interventions in our schools and community at large. I will not go into the specifics of this plan, but recognize and I give thanks to the Honourable Minister Christopher Tufton from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, who has brought me on board in this capacity. I recognize that there is need for the holistic approach in these schools. I will be indicating physical health importance, exercise through the ages, and Mr. President, Jamaica Moves is moving. We have moved into the schools. But I want to just do a little exercise for you guys. I want all of you to just put your hand on the desk. Just put your hand on the desk. Both or one? One, just one. And just press against it. Just push hard. And hold. Stop. Once again. Do you realize, thank you, you're exercising. You're doing an isotonic exercise. You can do it. This is exercise that you can do easily. This is exercise that we can do. It doesn't require expensive time. You can do it while you stand. The point is that whatever position you're in, you just strengthen, you just tone and relax, tone and relax. Wouldn't it be wonderful that our students at every level start school with 5 minutes of that? Simple. Mr. President, I will also advise on the significance in their nutrition and immune boosting, how to socially interact, how to enjoy solitude, but also the company of others, how to communicate, how to have differences in opinion, but still cooperate on a common goal, resolve conflict, mentally how to process their emotions, the importance of behavior in their attitude, and the mechanisms to enhance their thinking and cognition. Of course, Mr. President, I will seek to also help them to recognize their spiritual value and maximize that Jamaican spirit of self and belonging. A value that they are worthy, that they belong. A value that stems away from them being targets of a punitive approach. If they turn up to school in the wrong uniform or the wrong hairstyle, they're not going to be turned away. That is counterproductive. We cannot be saying to our young people, go and get an education, and then in the same breath, for something that you can instill a lower level of discipline, you choose to project hate rather than love. These are our young people. These are who we need to invest our best wishes in. Don't turn them away to say that they're going to go find some other group to hang out with. Trust me, there's many negatives. These are the young ones who are taking the initiative to be at school. You know, turn those guys away. They're the young ones who are trying to find themselves and their identity, so they come with some style. We are to guide them. We have to teach them what is appropriate. We have to teach them that they are being trained for a particular role in the society, and you must project that. No, don't turn them away. That's not an act of love, Mr. President. Mr. President, in our schools, we're seeing the manifestations, and I said this last year in my State of the Nation address, we're seeing the manifestation of inadequate sexual health education. I said it last year and I will say it again. Sex is not a taboo. It is taboo, sorry, but it should not be. It is a natural human function. We need to educate our young people so that they don't go out there in the wrong way to find answers. All right, you guys clap hard on that one, so I don't have to say anymore. Mr. President, solutions at the community level. Mr. President, I would love to see us bringing back the community spirit in our communities. Where we have creative culture, fun, and enjoyment. I would love to see every community center having exercise bars. My friend Matthew from Russia said, Saphire, why are there not bars that we can work out with? Just. Oh, I forgot Matthew and bar. We're talking about physical bars, Senator Crawford, where you go and...
It's physical? Yes, ma'am.
I see we're getting our... I see you're buying into the spiritual nature of things. Yes, yes, okay.
Ice tonic, of course.
Mr. President, our communities should be flooded with basketball courts, football field, cricket pitch, Ludi tournaments, domino tournaments, Monopoly tournaments, swimming pool, crochet and dressmaking classes, cooking and art classes that are directed, homework centers, ways of integrating our young persons with our elderly population, so that you have a generational connection and communication, that our elder people feel valued and are recognized for the worth that they play. This is what we have lost in that generational damage that was done, Mr. President. We need to bring it back. Bring back the love, Senator Allen.
Mr. President, oh, sorry, it's not 1:20. Your turn.
Mr. President, the member's time for speaking having expired, I'm proposing that we extend her time sufficient to complete her presentation.
Well, as they used to say in the 70s, the word is love. You can continue.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues. Mr. President, I now move to the solutions around mental health, because remember, I'm writing the prescription, and the prescription is holistic. When we reflect on the mental health of our people, Mr. President, it seems as if post-COVID mental health is now the new buzzword. As president of the Jamaica Psychiatric Association, I represent that group that holds a tradition of advocacy and of being a voice for persons who are oftentimes misunderstood and mistreated. We celebrate that mental health is finally being brought into the focus it deserves, but it is unfortunate that it took a pandemic to do so. We celebrate the increased advocacy, but we also do implore, especially persons who are seeking mental health care intervention, to ensure the professionals you are engaging are qualified to do so. I'm a psychiatrist. It took me 11.5 years. It is not just to talk. There is a way to navigate someone around their issues and seek complete care if you can. Mr. President, it is a matter right now of all hands on deck with response to the population need. And as I mentioned before, I have been incorporated by the Minister into the Minister of Health and Wellness in terms of navigating this space. I am orchestrating also the cohesion between the Jamaica Psychological Society, and I thank publicly Dr. Kai Morgan, who has helped in a quick response and intervention, harnessing members of that society, team of psychologists, and members from the Jamaica Psychiatric Association in a tailored intervention that we started in schools in the last 2 weeks of June. Mr. President, we went into over 40 schools, and it was a hybrid format, and we used Zoom as well as face-to-face. It was a great collaboration with the Ministry of Education and Youth. And this is something that we will be continuing. I think it was the initiative to collaborate between ministries is a great way to go forward in effecting some of the solutions that we may need for our society in efficient and effective ways. The pilot that we did was a success, Mr. President, and it is recognized to be continued. We had issues that were very unique. One of the things that I found when I went in, that there were specific schools that when I spoke to the principal, they had specific issues. And so we have to also know that it is not a cookie-cutter approach when we're dealing with our children. One school, the principal said, Doc, it looked like every parent where left go foreign. I said them put the picnic. We have pure barrel picnic. Meaning that these children were actually being affected, not financially, but because of the fact that, pardon? The absence of their parents. And we are sometimes as parents, remember I telling you, love is the answer. Remember, we're sometimes as parents thinking that the financial thing is what the child needs. It is your attention. It is your time. This is the solution, Mr. President. Mr. President, there is also, in terms of responses from the ministry, we saw the Reach Out Rangers program that was launched during COVID. Recently, the school mental health literacy program was also launched that sees the training of persons to interact and identify children who may have issues and direct them to the necessary clinical attention. Recently, the minister launched the Do Your Share and the Wellness Bench program. Helplines have been established where New Life has seen calls over 1,000 now. New Life Ministries has seen over 1,000 calls meted out since its launch in October 2019. Mr. President, I recognize, unfortunately, and this is not just in mental health, but a significant effect of COVID has been the lack of availability of some medications that are critically needed. So how this manifests for us and John Public is when you hear of someone who is mentally ill, who has unfortunately wielded a machete, like the one that beheaded someone, I think, near Red Hills. Or the one who attacked his 4-year-old niece in Rocky Point. These are persons who would have and could have been stable, but for lack of either the medication that they needed or the community team that needs to go out there and see to their care. And could I have table? Well, again, I projected this table when we were doing the appropriations bill, but this table I bring again that reflects the pyramid of the staffing that is needed for a mental health team and the gross deficit that we are working with, Mr. President. When you're supposed to have 88 psychiatric aides, you only have 45. When you're supposed to have 22 mental health nurses, you only have 8. It's all there. When you're supposed to have 2 occupational therapists, you have 0. And it is not, it's not, I'm a psychiatrist. Psychiatrists, we carry a weight. It's the, pardon? This table, if you could see it, it actually has the regions, southeast region, northeast, and the patients that are seen, the categories of staff, the psychiatrists, the psychologists, the psychiatric aides, social workers. And every category except psychiatric aides in the northeast region is below what it should be. No wonder we are seeing what we're seeing. No wonder. So we must address this. And I know, and let me say this, that I know that the highest level that is responsible recognizes this need, Mr. President. And we are waiting patiently because we have been told that intervention will come. And I'm looking forward to that, Mr. President. So I say to my colleagues, please, let us be patient. Because with this increased sensitization that we're having about mental health issues, these demands will even increase more. Mr. President, the other, and we're in this chamber, critical thing around mental health is the need for us to review our Mental Health Act. That Mental Health Act is implicated in so many pieces of our legislation. We're coming from where it was drafted in 1997, where it was based at that time an amendment from the old Lunatic Act. And it was done in a custodial manner. We need to see the amendment that reflects basic human rights and the community treatment of patients with mental illnesses. Mr. President, I now shift on my prescription to physical solutions. As we go to the management of this aspect of our response, our physical health being heralded especially by the very capable Minister of Health, the Honourable Dr. Christopher Tufton, and his State Minister, the Honourable Judith Cuthbert-Flynn, and their team at the Ministry have been working assiduously to see not just the COVID response, but the continued delivery of healthcare to our people. And let me at this time thank our healthcare workers, our frontline workers. I think it was on May 23rd of this year, they had a healthcare workers appreciation day. And it's also recognition of the administrators in healthcare, Mr. President. The persons who are not directly there, but are behind the scenes helping to make the system function. Mr. President, it takes cash to care, and health is costly business. And so, a sustainable finance mechanism for healthcare is being sought after, with the appointment of Dr. Damian King with the task of exploring health financing options to assist in advocacy necessary to ensure a more sustainable health financing model. Mr. President, we're also seeking to see the better management and more efficient management of the NCDs, with further improvement where technology and telemedicine be incorporated, especially in outpatient settings, with electronic health records and teleservices being incorporated. The establishment of public-private partnerships to allow access through the Code Care project to reduce waiting time for much-needed elective surgeries. Obesity has always plagued us, coming from the generational stuff today. So, school nutrition program is in place, front of package labeling to know the amount of salt, sugar, and fats in our food. And of course, our Jamaica moves. Jamaica moves, it moved into the schools and is now moving into the Caribbean. So we must congratulate our efforts there. Mr. President, technology is being incorporated in our health system to see where we see the upgrade and networking of telehealth services to over 130 health centers, including telemedicine electronic records. With respect to infrastructure, in 2019, the CAPEX 5-year plan, which is the most significant investment in health infrastructure since independence, was committed to by this government, where over $5 billion is going to the Cornwall Regional Rehabilitation Program, which is now in phase 2B of its execution. A 250-bed Western Children and Adolescent Hospital has been, it is love, Senator Fraser-Bin. We're not going to turn away from something that is positive. We must have contribution from your side also. Love it, yes. The UAE infrastructure expansion, the most significant in over 50 years. I am particularly glad for this one. This is where I work. And this will see the inclusion of a six-story tower that will include an adolescent psychiatric facility, surgical and interventional diagnostics, along with trauma and urgent care services. Mr. President, this adolescent psychiatric facility is so very needed, Mr. President. The Spanish Town Hospital will also see an upgrade that will include 3 hospitals and 10 health centers. Prescription rights for advanced nurse practitioners so we can increase the access to care for our people. We also want to see that the patient charter of rights and responsibilities are meted out to our citizens so they know their rights. Mr. President, the seeds are being sown to improve the physical health of our people. Mr. President, I only have about 5 or so minutes left. Our social health solutions. Again, the holistic prescription. Our social health, Mr. President, is very critical as we are social creatures. And social health has taken on such an importance that it is almost a separate, social development is a separate arm in and of itself. Sometimes you don't really consciously realize that it is health related. But when you think that our first social interactions are amongst our family, and it goes from there to our communities and to the nation and the society, you recognize that this is critical to our well-being. And so, Mr. President, we have to recognize the great efforts of Minister Desmond McKenzie in enhancing social welfare for our people. There is great focus that is going to be placed on especially the rural parts of Jamaica this administrative year, where 44% of Jamaica's total population lives in the rural parts of Jamaica. And so the government plans to increase the pace of economic and social activity, driving policies and programs that will hopefully unchain the people of rural Jamaica from the cycle of intergenerational poverty. Mr. President, I am from rural Jamaica. I was born in Clarendon. Here, Senator Scott Motley, I celebrate this rural focus. If we fix rural Jamaica, we won't have as much problems in urban Jamaica. With the expansion of access to social and productive infrastructure such as rural electrification and water, which started in the Chambers Pen. There's a pilot started in Chambers Pen in Western Hanover. Over 1,500 persons in 300 households will benefit from a supply of 52,500 gallons of fresh water every day, Mr. President. There's a concomitant community center and basic school repairs, skills training, farming assistance to farmers, and indigent homes being built. Mr. President, the overall cost of this pilot for that rural transformation and revitalization of Chambers Pen is over $223 million, Mr. President. But guess what? We will see this program give new life to that rural community and others in the next 2 years.
Hear, hear.
We see, Mr. President, where Minister McKenzie also saw to the start of the construction for a Kingston Transitional Facility, which will assist in the caring of our homeless population in the corporate area. And recently, Mr. President, I was so happy to see it, that our homeless individuals will be getting skills training and certification. Absolutely fantastic. Night shelters of rest and care for our homeless population beginning in St. Thomas this financial year. And it is the intention of his ministry to build out night shelters to every parish over the next 2 years. Mr. President, I have to celebrate the 50 new garbage trucks that are on their way. Let us clean up our physical space. And at this point, I will also say, I celebrate the move by the Broadcasting Corporation in putting a restriction on some of the content of our music, Mr. President. And you know, when I heard that there was a comparison being made to Bob Marley's I Shot the Sheriff, Mr. President, Bob Marley sung that song as a way of motivating one person to stand up for themselves. It is a song of strength. It is a song of identity. The song about Ensure and the M16 does not do that. And this argument about creative freedom, where there is a price to pay that we must recognize. And if we are going to clean up this society, we need to take a stand. We need to say our children are more important than the lyrics that are associated with what is bad. Mr. President, so I celebrated. No, it is a love speech because I want love in my music. I don't want hate. Mr. President, in closing, I will say again, time come for us to stop projecting hate amongst our people. Time come for us to live and project what Bob Marley gave to the rest of the world. One love. This is a song, as I said, that was chosen to traverse the universe on our behalf from little Jamaica. And yet, we project so much hate to each other. Mr. President, I reflect again on what COVID taught us and the reflection between between health, likewise, and governance. We in this chamber play the role of parents to the people that we govern. We are here to provide guidance. We're here to provide protection, to see to the needs, to have foresight when danger is coming and put in the mechanisms. We're here to discipline, but not necessarily in the drastic manners that we are so ingrained in by our history. We need to recognize, Mr. President, we also have another role to play for our people. That, as we as parents in here do, we seek to see to our children's happiness. And how does a child demonstrate happiness and engage in happiness? It is quite simple, Mr. President. They play. They play. And when you think about it, when you play, you engage all 4 aspects of health. You're physically engaged, you're mentally engaged, you're socially engaged, and you're spiritually engaged. And so, Mr. President, a key solution, I think, coming from this chamber of government is that we seek to enable play amongst our people. We seek to enable our people to play as families, as communities, as a nation. That is why the Grand Gala was so fantastic. That's why the Grand Gala was so great. It stirred the Jamaican spirit. It stirred the Jamaican spirit. Right? Mr. President, could I get the other photo, please? Could I get the other slide? Could I get the other slide, please? Right? Yes, Mr. President. And so, as we consider solutions to crime and violence.
Sorry, Senator Fraser Binns, this is most unlike you. Would you allow the speaker to reach her crescendo in silence?
Mr. President, I have to recognize that in playing, there's and I will tie this into my private member's motion that I tabled around the psilocybin industry. No, hold on. No, that is it. That is it.
Senator Brown wasn't here when you tabled it, he said to repeat it.
Mr. President, there are a lot of persons who are coming into Jamaica who are engaging in play, in spiritual healing around the psilocybin industry. And I recognize magic mushrooms. Mr. President, there is great potential potential. I laid this private member's motion because Jamaica is naturally poised to take that industry to its highest. Let us not.
No pun intended.
Let us not go the route of the cannabis industry, where we are not at our peak when we naturally had it. Let us formalize. Let us make sure there are standards of operations, standards of therapeutic application. We cannot have it that persons just freely take this thing. It has negative effects. This is a substance that can be abused, but we must recognize that it also has significant good healing potential, Mr. President. And so, the reason I triggered on play was that there are a lot of foreigners who are coming in with monies to play in Jamaica for that reason. There's a huge potential of spiritual health as a tourist product. And we must seek to develop this. Mr. President, I call now for this last photo. And Senator Morris, I heard you lamenting about family. This was when I opened the State of the Nation presentation in 2016, when I was first appointed to the Senate. And it says, Senator Longmore calls to Jamaicans to reinforce morality, family, and community spirit. It's the same thing I am saying now, but I'm going to take it to another level. I am going to take it to another level. Senator Fraser-Binns' perspective and positive projections, please. What I am calling for now, as this side does, we elevate and we take it to another level. What I am presently calling for, Mr. President, is for us to put legislative teeth behind our advocacy for family. I am calling for us to consider the declaration of a National Day of the Jamaican Family. A National Family Day, Mr. President. Put it officially on our calendar that we value family. That families are enabled to take time to play, take time to spend time, to feel that they belong to something, Mr. President. That they are part of this Jamaican family that shares that very strong Jamaican spirit, Mr. President. And so, Mr. President, with that, I say to you, have a good rest of the day and find some time to play.
Thank you very, very much, Senator Saphire Longmore. Much appreciated. Senator Albin Hill.
Mr. President, it is not contemplated.
So we're going to move to suspend the State of the Nation debate.
Yes, for another sitting. And
yeah. The question is that the State of the Nation debate be suspended for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Finish. Is it,
Mr. President, it is not contemplated for us to do any further business today. I therefore ask that the Senate adjourn for a date to be fixed.
May I just say, while you are playing for the weekend, you take time to remember the purpose of Monday, to reflect on the sacrifices made by our heroes, And you know, I ask you all if you have a copy of the legislation that was used to expunge the criminal records of the national heroes and look at all the names mentioned there of persons who gave their lives and, in fact, the lives of their families for the benefit of this Jamaica land we love.
Mr. President, sorry to interrupt. On the motion of adjournment, I just wish to recognize Mental Health Week that ends this week. I was to have done it in my SON, but I omitted to do so. But significant amount of activities being done at the regional level have been executed, and I think we all recognize the importance of mental health at this time. Thank you, Mr. President.
Before your presentation, we certainly do now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So members would have heard the question that we adjourn for a date to be fixed, and as I said, contemplate the reason for our celebration on Monday, particularly the trade unions, Senator Lambert Brown and Senator Gale, the contribution of the union movement to the country as it stands today, and the members of the... And you can read William Gordon's love letter on another day. Thank you very much. This Senate now stands adjourned with your agreement.